kind and warm words of introduction. All I can tell you is that the House of Commons in Ottawa has been elevated by your presence there. We're delighted to have you. You mentioned that my son, who has a mischievous sense of humor, I was telling Carol about the story that you recanted, but there is another one. I won't take time, because if I start with him, I can regale you actually the whole evening. It might even be better than what I might say. But he, when I was a candidate for Parliament, he was then 12 years old in 1999, and he was rather upset that I was running for Parliament. We had a very close relationship, and he saw this relationship as maybe getting disrupted. And so the night of that I was nominated, he was walking around looking forlorn and upset, and a journalist notices him and he says, "What do you think of your dad? He's running for Parliament." And he said, answered as follows, it was the front page of the Montreal Gazette the next day. He said, "I think my dad's crazy." So he said, "A law professor, a human rights lawyer, that I can understand. What does he want to run for Parliament for? Nothing ever happens there. They don't do anything. If anything, some become corrupt, and there's a Monica Lewinsky waiting for him around the corner." 6 weeks later, I'd only mention this because Murray mentioned I have gotten elected with 92% of the vote. So the journalist calls up my son and he says, "What do you think of your dad now? He got 92% of the vote." And my son answered as follows, again, front page in the newspaper. He said, "Donald Duck running in this riding for the Liberals would have got 92% of the vote." He said, "My dad lost, that would have been a problem." There are a lot of other stories. And so I really am delighted to be here to share in this day, as Murray said, day of commemoration and celebration of what Ed Fitch called today the most momentous Jewish event in Victoria in 150 years. Joined in by the Freemasons, by church groups, by faith groups, indeed by the hereditary chief and the elder, and their moving remarks, and in fact the recognition of the Eskimo First Nation, of the Aboriginal people as the original inhabitants of this country. And Marianne Thomas, with her remarks both at the ceremony earlier and this evening, about the importance of helping each other, the message from the Creator, the blowing of the shofar by Rabbi Brechner, as it is mentioned, the appreciation, and this I found astounding, I have to tell you, the appreciation that amongst Temple Emmanuel's original congregants were Lumley Franklin was Canada's first Jewish mayor. Henry Nathan Jr., who was mentioned, was the first ever Jewish member of Parliament. But what I found really compelling and intriguing about it is that he was the first Jewish member of Parliament immediately after British Columbia, became part of Confederation. Now I say this because, yes, somebody said to me, "Well, you were the first Jewish Minister of Justice ever in Canada." I said, "Yeah, that took 132 years. But what happened here with Henry Nathan, right at the beginning, and similarly with Samuel Schultz, Canada's first Jewish judge, though I have to say, one of the other things that intrigued me about him is that he pitched the first shutout ever in British Columbia. So first. But when I was listening to it, and I was sensing the community, it's not the first time that I was here. After my first trip as Minister of Justice, I came out to Vancouver and Victoria at the time. But what I sense today is that all of this happened here because 150 years ago, Victoria was a welcoming community, a model then, as it has been since, of what a pluralistic society is all about. A multicultural mosaic, where multiculturalism is not just a cliche term, but is in fact a lived reality. A community reflective of what Rabbi Reinstein called the rich tapestry of our Canadian diversity, the blessing of unity through diversity. And a synagogue that cares for its homeless, a synagogue that cares for its youth at risk, a synagogue that is the embodiment of social justice. And in that spirit, I want to speak about the pursuit of justice, about Jewish values that underpin the pursuit of justice, Jewish values that I take to be, in effect, universal values, and how those Jewish universal values impacted on me in my work as a minister of justice, indeed, how they ended up being the core of my identity. And here I have to say that it was my father of blessed memory. And when I say this, I must make mention of my very close cousin, Meyer Horowitz, and his wife, Barbara. Because Meyer and we grew up together in Montreal, now resident here, of course, and members of Temple Emmanuel. But Meyer was very, very close to my father. And my father saw in Meyer a role model and held him out to me as being a role model. And as I told you, Barbara, that today when I was in the synagogue, I marveled at that quilted chuppah that you and your friends put together. It was just a wonderful, almost Chagall-like chuppah, and all I can say is kol hakavod to you and those who put it together. And it was my father, blessed memory, who taught me when I was too young to understand the profundity of these teachings, but who taught me and spoke to me of the importance, the imperative of tzedek, tzedek tirdof, and he said it to me in Hebrew, the biblical injunction of justice, justice shall you pursue. And he said this was equal to all the other commandments combined. And this, as he would put it to me, this must be your Vishinam Tam Levanacha. This must be what you should teach onto your children. And that the etymology of the word tzedek in Hebrew requires at least 3 words in English to translate it, of justice and charity and generosity. And then he said to me, and I saw this when I was in the synagogue today, that a school that does not have a charity box, a synagogue that does not have a charity box, and today in the display in the Temple Emmanuel, you saw it, they called it the pushka, the charity box. He said it's not a synagogue you should pray in or a school that you should go to. Again, always the importance of tzedakah and of justice. But I have to say that it was my mother, also blessed memory, when she would hear my father speaking to me of this, would say to me that if you want to pursue justice, you have to understand, you have to feel the injustice about you. You have to go in and about your community and beyond and feel the injustice. Otherwise, the pursuit of justice is just an abstract concept. Otherwise, it's just a kind of theoretical construct. You have to go and feel the injustice and combat that injustice. And so I think right after when I was sworn in as Minister of Justice with my parents' teachings resonating for me, and I remember when they were telling me about how to take the oath and what I had to say, and I said, after they told me, because it wasn't in the oath, can I say after I say I, Erwin Kotler, son of, not in fact, and they said, no, it's not in the oath, you can't say it. So when I took the oath, I said it and said my parents' names to myself. And right after that, after we all took the oath, we were ushered out into the kind of proverbial scrum with the media. And I said to them at that point, I said, I just want to say one thing, that in my work I will be guided by one overarching principle. I said, that of tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. And within that, the promotion and protection of equality. Of equality, not just a foundational principle, which it is, of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, but of the pursuit of equality as a foundational principle for the building of a just society, and of the promotion and protection of human dignity, for the building of a society that is not only just, but one that is compassionate and fair. And so at that point, having taken the oath, I then said to myself, if I'm going to follow my parents' teachings, I should go in and about Canada and get a sense of what is happening in this country, to get a feel for this injustice if I want to pursue justice. And the first place I ended up coming to was Vancouver and Victoria, because I started in the West. But I have to tell you, I had an incredible encounter before I could start and going across Canada. It was an encounter with a group of Aboriginal law students from a Kitsarit Law School in Nunavut. And they were the first meeting I ever had with anybody. The first day that I was Minister of Justice, it happened to be in Ottawa. They asked to meet, and we met, and I never forgot the conversation. And they said to me, Professor Collar, we're not just law students. We're Aboriginal law students. We come with a past, with a history, with a heritage, with a culture, with our own spirituality, with our own Indigenous legal tradition. And we've been dislocated from all that. We've been dispossessed of our land and our history and our heritage and our culture and our spirituality and our own Indigenous legal tradition. It's not that we go to court, they said to me, to nurture a grievance. We go to court to reconnect to who we are. We go to court to anchor ourselves in our roots. We go to court to give expression to our Indigenous legal tradition. But in whatever we do, we feel a great sense of pain, because we feel the Canadian people and the Canadian government do not understand who we are, where we've come from, and what we aspire to be. And I said to them that I'd like to share with them a parable that comes out of my tradition, but comes out of other traditions as well. And the parable goes as follows. Students come to their rabbi, and you can substitute it for this, the priest, imam. Students come to their rabbi and they say, Rabbi, we love you. And the rabbi says, do you know what hurts me? And the students say, Rabbi, why do you ask if we know what hurts you? If we tell you we love you? The rabbi says, because if you don't know what hurts me, you can't tell me you love me. Now that's a profound principle of human relationships. And as I said to them, we will try as a government to relate to the Aboriginal people in terms of that principle and try to govern ourselves in a way where we can, if we can't fully feel, but understand that which you have gone through, that which you aspire to be. And then I said something else. I said, you know, I want to share something with you, albeit it may sound somewhat presumptuous or pretentious, I said. But I also come from an Aboriginal people. I said, a people that still inhabits the same land, worships the same God, studies the same Aboriginal Bible, hearkens to the same Aboriginal prophets like Isaiah, speaks the same Aboriginal language, Hebrew, and bears the same Aboriginal name, Israel, as we did 2,500 years ago, reminding me of what Chief Thomas said tonight, that our peoples, our respective peoples, have struggled for the place in our respective homelands. Whereupon they came up to me and they said, you know, we thought this was going to be another blah blah professor by another white man. Welcome one Aboriginal people to another. And I say this because there's a lesson in all this. And the lesson is to speak out of our own sense of authenticity. And too often, we see ourselves as atomized individuals disconnected. But what the synagogue imparted to me today at Temple Emmanuel, the whole ceremony, the whole history, what the Aboriginal people were speaking really of today, is that we have to speak out of that sense of our history and our heritage, of our ethics and our ethos, of our values and of our vision. And so what I'd like to do at this point, and again, one of our prophets, Isaiah, put it, if there is no vision, the people will perish. And Temple Emmanuel has had an abiding vision these 150 years, which finds expression in those social justice commitments. What I want to share with you now is some of those Jewish values, when I say those universal values, that constitute the foundational principles of the pursuit of justice. And the first is that of zachor, of remembrance. And in commemorating today the 150th anniversary of Temple Emmanuel, we are giving expression to that notion of zachor, which is so resplendent in our history, in our liturgy. You know, when Ayelet sang so beautifully And when she also sang the question of the Kaddish, I mean, that's Zachor. That is the kind of personal remembrance of our dearest and beloved departed that we use when we say the Kaddish. And we're Zachor, of course, recently when we commemorated Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Zachor remembrance is bound up with Holocaust remembrance, bound up with the remembrance of horrors too terrible to be believed, but not too terrible to have happened. Where the Holocaust, as Elie Wiesel has put it so well, the Holocaust was a war against the Jews in which not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were targeted victims. And as we say, and again as our sages teach us, Hametzil Adam Achad Ki Litzil Olam Kulo, that if you save a single person, it is as if you have saved an entire universe. Just as if you kill a single person, it is as if you have killed an entire universe. And so this first lesson that comes out of this first foundational principle of Zachor, that we are each, wherever we are, the guarantors of each other's destiny. Which brings me to the second value, that Zachor is not only bound up with Holocaust remembrance, but it is also bound up with Jewish identity in the most profound sense of the word. Bound up with the principle of equality as the core of what that Jewish identity is all about. For what does it mean to say, as we said recently in the Passover holiday, that b'chol dor v'dor chayav adam narot atzmo ki yatzah miMitzrayim, that in every generation, each person must see himself and herself as if we too were part of the oppression, and as if we too were part of the march towards freedom. Reminding us always that the Haggadah brings, if you look at the Passover Haggadah, it almost speaks to what Temple Emmanuel is all about. Let all who are hungry come and eat. That's how the Haggadah begins. That's what Temple Emmanuel is all about. And as we say in Passover and repeat again the notion of Zachor ki ger hayita b'Mitzrayim, remember that you too were a stranger in Egypt. And the word stranger repeats itself 36 times in the Bible, over and over again. The need to have respect for the stranger, that there should be one law for yourself and the stranger, and the need to respect the vulnerable amongst us. And so the second principle here of equality, which is at the core of the principle of Zachor, as Zachor is at the core of our identity. These principles then of remembrance and equality, foundational principles of the Jews as an Aboriginal people, if you will, give rise to a third value. And that is the dangers of what is called Lashon Hara, or evil speech, or assaultive speech. And here I have to say, because this was profound teachings of my late mother, I never heard her ever say a bad word about anybody in my life, which is what made her teachings about the dangers of assaultive or evil speech so powerful. Because she would quote to me the notion, she didn't know the Hebrew, but in Hebrew, which is a chaim v'mavet b'yad, that life and death is on the tip of the tongue. That you should not go up and down your community as a gossiper, as a slanderer. And you know, I felt the meaning of this, of how words can hurt, because when I was in kindergarten, you know, we used to have this refrain, and some of you may remember, that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Well, I learned that that was not the case. That words can hurt. That words can maim. That in the most tragic sense, as we know also from the horrors of Jewish and human history, that words can kill. And so we have to ourselves take heed of this lesson, of the dangers of evil or assaultive speech, whether it be within our families, with our friends, within our community, between communities, within our people. Let us remember that in terms of Jewish history, the temple was destroyed because of hateful speech. And also the dangers of such speech between peoples and between states. For the enduring lesson of the Holocaust, and and the genocides that followed, that these genocides occurred not simply because of the machinery of death, but because of state-sanctioned incitement to hate and to genocide. It is this teaching of contempt, this demonizing of the other, this is where it all begins. As the Supreme Court of Canada put it in upholding the constitutionality of our anti-hate laws, and did so again just 2 months ago, when they said that, and I quote the court words profoundly affirming, that the Holocaust did not begin in the chamber, said the court. It began in the gantry. It began with words. These, as the court put it, are the catastrophic effects of racism. These, as the court put it, are the chilling facts of history. And we have been witnessing yet again in Ahmadinejad's Iran, and I use that term to distinguish it from the people and the publics of Iran, who are otherwise the targets of mass domestic repression by the Iranian regime. We've been witnessing there for some time, yet again, a state-sanctioned incitement to hate and genocide. And as the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament found in one of the few unanimous findings of fact and conclusions of law in our divisive parliament, as I was telling Carol over dinner, very hard today to get a consensus, let alone a unanimity about anything. But on this point, the Parliament was unanimous that Iran has already committed the crime of incitement to genocide, prohibited under the Genocide Convention, and that state parties to the Genocide Convention, like Canada, the United States, the European Union, are obliged, it's not a policy option, are obliged to undertake the mandated legal remedies under international law to bring the Iranian leadership to account. But I regret to say that as we meet, not one state party to the Genocide Convention has undertaken any of the mandated legal remedies, including a simply modest one of referring this incitement to genocide to the United Nations for deliberation and accountability, or initiating an interstate complaint against Iran, which is also a state party to the Genocide Convention, before the International Court of Justice, reminding us at this point really of a fourth lesson, and that is the dangers of indifference and inaction in the face of such incitement or in the face of mass atrocity. You know, this year, Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, fell on the same day as Rwandan Genocide Day, where in 1994, from April to the beginning of July, in less than 3 months, 1 million Rwandans, mostly ethnic Tutsis, a few moderate Hutus, were murdered in a genocide that took place in less than 3 months. And what makes this genocide so unspeakable is not only the horror of the genocide itself, but that this genocide was preventable. Nobody could say that we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. Just as with regard to Darfur, nobody could say that we did not know. We knew, but we did not act. Just as nobody could say in the first year of the Syrian peaceful protest, when day after day, innocent Syrian civilians were being massacred. And those of us who said, you know, that we have to take the responsibility to protect doctrine seriously, that we have to intervene to protect it. I don't mean putting boots on the ground or all kinds of things that could have been done, that still could be done, to protect the Syrian civilians. And we were told, no. Any intervention, if you intervene, there'll be more killing, there'll be more sectarian divides, there will be jihadists who will come in. All the things that we were told would happen if we intervened happened because we didn't intervene. And I hope that perhaps next week, if the international community can finally come together, that maybe we will begin to undertake seriously the responsibility to protect doctrine, which is a norm of international law, rather than betray the doctrine and betray the lessons of history. Which brings me to a fifth value, moving to a close, and that is the protection of the vulnerable. That the test of a just society is how it protects the most vulnerable among them. How does it protect its poor, its elderly, its sick, its immigrants, its refugees, its battered women, its violated children? And I have to say, the most profound human rights lesson that I ever learned was taught to me by my daughter Gila when she was 15 years of age. She's now 33 years of age. She came to me when she was 15. She said, "Daddy, if you want to know what the real test of human rights is all about, always ask yourself, at any time, in any situation, in any part of the world, is it good for children? Is what is happening good for children?" That's the real test of what human rights is all about. And that's why I'm so inspired by what the Temple of Mango has been doing in looking after young people at risk, in taking care of the homeless. And I was proud that the first law that we introduced as a government when I was Minister of Justice, the first law that we introduced was a law called the Protection of Children and Other Vulnerable Persons, which was known amongst us in the cabinet as Gila's Law, inspired by my daughter. And the second one was a law with respect to combating trafficking in persons, particularly in women and children. Because this is, regrettably, the new global slave trade of our time. And tragically, the fastest growing criminal industry of our time. And so the protection of the vulnerable defines what a just and compassionate society is all about. Bring me to the sixth value. And this is something that, again, our sages remind us, and did so at the time of Passover, that as a result of righteous women, the Jewish people were liberated from Egypt. And I recall 20 years ago, when I was in Vienna at the time, that the clarion call, a conference that was energized by the women's movements at that conference, was that women's rights are human rights, and there are no human rights if they don't include the rights of women. And that women's rights, therefore, must be a priority on our justice agenda, not only as a matter of rhetoric, not only as a matter of principle, but as a matter of policy. Because as it was said then, and still remains true now, 20 years ago, as UNESCO put it, that discrimination against women is an injustice tantamount to apartheid in South Africa. And this is something, therefore, that we have to make a resolve that the issue of gender equality will be part of both the domestic and international justice in our day. Which brings me now to the seventh and final value in this pursuit of justice. That which is sometimes spoken of as tikkun olam, the repairing of the human condition, which must be the clarion call for the pursuit of justice in the international arena as well as in the domestic arena. Because if we look around internationally today, what we find, and I regret to say it, is a pervasive sense of injustice, a pervasive poverty, a pervasive inequality, a pervasive environmental degradation, a pervasive occurrence of mass atrocity. The whole so shocking and demeaning to the human condition that tikkun olam becomes an overriding imperative. I'm talking about a situation where the assets of 3 of the richest people of the world exceed the combined GDP of 48 of the world's poorest developing countries. Where close to 3 billion people in the world live in poverty, earning less than $2 a day. And where close to half of them, 1.5 billion people, live in extreme poverty, less than $1 a day. Where some 4 billion people in the world today have no access to basic sanitation. Where some 50,000 Africans die every week of preventable causes. In the face of such numbing statistics, we must always realize that behind every statistic is a human being. But I'm not unmindful of the fact that when one hears these numbing statistics, one may very well put up that plaintive call, well, what can I do? What can I do in the face of all this pervasive injustice, as you put it? And I'm reminded of what Michael Bloomfield wrote in a pamphlet that he just gave me yesterday, when he quoted the Sayyid Rabbi Tarfon, it may not be incumbent upon us to complete the work of the pursuit of justice, but we are not free to desist from beginning it. And I remember also the words of the great sage Maimonides, the Rambam, who said that each one of us should see the world as divided into half good and half evil. Therefore, one good deed by any one of us at any time can transform the scales from evil to good. Therefore, one good deed by any one of us has, if you will, a kind of cosmic significance, has a kind of transformative impact with regard to repairing the human condition, tikkun olam. And so when we speak of tikkun olam, I'm not talking about tikkun olam in the abstract. I'm not talking about human rights in the abstract. I'm talking about what each one of us can do every day to advance the pursuit of justice in our time. It may be just saying a kind word to somebody and making their day, or refrain from saying an unkind word and hurting their day. It may be just in terms of visiting the sick. It may be in taking care of the elderly. It may be in our treatment of the stranger, the immigrant, the refugee, the child. It may be in realizing that the world is a narrow bridge, that we're all connected in what has sometimes become the cliche of a global village, but we're all connected in this sense of being and bondedness. Pursuing justice, doing justice one by one, ourselves and in our human relationships, within our community, within our people, between peoples, between states. This is what the pursuit of justice, this is what tikkun olam is about so profoundly with respect to what each one of us can do. And so we need not just dream of building a just society. Through the doing of justice, through pursuing justice as a call to action, through our ma'asim tovim, through our good deeds, in the Maimonidean sense of just one good deed by any one of us, every day, will transform the human condition. We need, therefore, not only dream of building a just and compassionate society, we have within us the capacity to build that just and compassionate society. And Temple Emmanuel, for me, has been the role model, and I want to thank you for today's experience. Kol hakavod.